April 1995. The Oklahoma City bombing. The single biggest domestic terrorist attack in U.S. history. The perpetrator, Timothy McVeigh, cites his motive as revenge for the actions of U.S. authorities at Waco, Texas. Where 76 men, women, and children die in a blazing fire. Were cult members led to their deaths by charismatic leader David Koresh? Or killed by out-of-control federal agents? To this day, events at Waco weigh heavily on America's consciousness. Now a former FBI agent will unravel what really went on at Waco. Disasters don't just happen. They're a chain of critical events. Unravel the clues and count down those final seconds from disaster. The United States. Waco, Texas. April the 19th, 1993, 12:15 p.m. FBI agents surround a blazing compound belonging to a religious sect known as the Branch Davidians. Clive Doyle is trapped inside.
I'm praying, God, you better do something quick.
But Clive is more frightened of the FBI than the raging fire.
I can remember looking out saying, if we jump out, do you think they'll shoot us?
He's stuck in the Branch Davidians' chapel. Clive has been a follower of charismatic leader David Koresh for 10 years.
I felt that this guy had something, and just about everybody that was living there had bought into the idea that he was a prophet or a messenger of God of some kind.
The federal authorities think otherwise. 7 weeks previously, on February the 28th, 1993, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms, the ATF, raid the compound to arrest David Koresh. They suspect him of illegally converting semi-automatic firearms into fully automatic weapons. A local news cameraman captures the moment agents storm the Davidian compound. The surprise raid goes disastrously wrong. Koresh and the cult knew they were coming.
You're shooting at us at Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel? Yeah, tell them there are children and women in here and to call it off.
In a deadly firefight, 4 members of the ATF and 6 cult members are killed. Koresh is shot in the attack. But he refuses to give himself up. With ATF agents dead, federal law dictates the FBI must take command of the situation. Their lead negotiator is Byron Sage.
I actually first heard about the incident as I was getting ready to go to church with the family. Phone rang at my boss down in San Antonio. Immediately said, there's been a raid that's gone horribly awry. 4 agents are believed to be dead, 16 wounded. get to Waco as soon as you can and assist with the negotiations.
This is Byron Sage from the FBI again. Can I talk to David?
At first, the FBI plays it softly, successfully negotiating the surrender of 14 adults and 21 children. But a hard core of Davidians have refused to budge. Sage sends the Davidians a video camera so he can get a clear idea of the people he's dealing with.
ATF, you boys are wrong. Your practices, your habits, yeah. And pushing people around with guns. Hey, I'll meet you at the doorstep any day. You know, and somebody will get hurt. If you want to keep playing that game, I'm talking to you. Somebody's going to get hurt.
The FBI's priority is to get the children out.
We were pressing David to send those kids out, and he finally said, "Hey, you don't understand. The rest of these children are my children. They're not coming out."
The stalemate has developed into one of the longest sieges in U.S. law enforcement history. And Koresh isn't cooperating with negotiators.
David said, "You don't understand. I don't answer to you. I answer to a higher power." And he said, "And my God told me to wait."
FBI commanders are frustrated with the slow progress and increase pressure on the Davidians. They cut power to the compound and deprive the community of heat, light, and water.
They're doing what they call sleep deprivation. They would have telephones ringing, trumpets playing, reveille, strafing runs from airplanes, all kinds of stuff like that.
But these tactics are not working. And the standoff is about to enter its 50th day.
We've negotiated with these people for n number of days. We've tried everything else.
Now the FBI have a new plan. April the 19th, 5:59 a.m. Byron Sage phones the compound and speaks to David Koresh's right-hand man, Steve Schneider.
I said, "Steve, we're prepared to introduce tear gas into the building. We are not entering the building."
Man, come and get your guns.
Inside the Mount Carmel compound, Koresh prepares his followers.
Let's move. Let's go.
The Davidians have amassed a deadly arsenal of automatic and semi-automatic weapons.
Let's go. Keep moving, people.
6 a.m. The compound is surrounded. 2 modified tanks approach the building. They're carrying canisters of CS gas, a type of tear gas. Byron Sage crouches at an FBI position almost 300 meters from the compound. It's as close as he dares to get.
David, individuals inside the Branch Davidian compound, we are in the process of placing tear gas inside the building.
There is no response from inside. Hostage rescue team member Jim McGee is one of the agents preparing to move in.
We're going to try to make that environment so uncomfortable in there that they have to surrender and come out.
6:05 a.m.
They didn't get 15, 20 yards onto the Davidian property before all hell broke loose.
As soon as we entered in, past that perimeter, we started receiving fire.
The CS gas is injected through nozzles, which penetrate the walls and windows of the building. The Davidians are prepared. They've stockpiled a supply of gas masks.
I put a gas mask on when they were spraying in the chapel, and pretty soon I couldn't breathe. And that gas started getting on your skin, and it burned like crazy. Felt like battery acid or something,
Heavy fire from the compound prompts the FBI to quickly change their tactics.
Plan B was that if the agents introducing the tear gas were to come under fire, that the entire compound would be saturated. As quickly as we could accomplish it, render the whole building untenable and force them to come out through windows, whatever.
The FBI send in 4 armored personnel carriers, and Jim McGee returns the Davidians' fire with ferret rounds, canisters filled with more CS gas.
We were firing the CS gas in via M79 grenade launchers. I could determine that we were being fired upon from a certain location, and that's where I would put some of the projectiles from the M79.
The ferret rounds shatter on impact with the ground and release CS gas to targeted areas.
One came in and flew past, and went under the pews in the chapel. You could hear it hissing over in the corner somewhere.
For those wearing masks, the gas is tolerable. For those without, breathing is difficult, and the gas burns skin and eyes. Children suffer the most.
There was no gas mask for the children. Parents were trying to wrap the children with wet towels or wet blankets to keep the gas out of their faces.
6:31 a.m. Byron Sage continues to urge sect members to come out.
I said, "We are not entering your compound. This siege is over. You are under arrest. You can stop this at any time by giving us a signal that you're prepared to exit."
But the Davidians aren't moving. The FBI use the tanks like battering rams. The Davidians watch as their home is bulldozed around them.
The last time they came through the front door into the chapel, I'd say pretty much the whole tank was in the building, and the boom was sticking into the chapel.
The FBI can now fire CS gas deeper into the building.
David gave instructions for the women to bring the children downstairs and to put them in the vault. it was the safest place in the building if anything should happen.
The vault is a secure concrete room in the center of the wooden compound. There is no sign the Davidians are ready to surrender, as the FBI hoped. Then the FBI spot flames in the compound.
There was some other reports of smoke in other locations, and before he knew it, you started to see flames. It's windy. It's a very windy day. There are probably gusts up to 20 miles an hour blowing across, the Texas plain there. And this is a tinderbox, this place.
A whole community, including 28 children, are now trapped in an inferno. Their lives are at stake unless they evacuate the compound and surrender to the FBI. The fire is getting closer to Clive Doyle.
I began hearing people screaming behind me. I recognized the voices of who was screaming because they were further in, you might say, to the fire.
His daughter Cherie is trapped upstairs. The approaching flames prevent Doyle from trying to save her.
My youngest daughter, she was 18. She's the one that I spent the siege with most of the time until they were told to go upstairs. And I didn't see her, after that.
FBI agent Byron Sage broadcasts an urgent message to David Koresh.
I tried to talk directly to David over the PA, and I said, David, don't end it this way. You're supposed to be a savior. Save those people. Bring them out.
12:13 p.m. The whole building is now engulfed in flames.
All of this smoke started coming down outside the building. It just got all sucked in, and everything turned pitch black. I could feel tremendous heat overhead. Couldn't see anything.
Doyle escapes alone, leaving his daughter in the burning building.
The smoke coming off of me and everything, and the skin on my hands is just rolling off. And I thought, well, if I stand here, I'm going to get burned to death anyway. Kind of jump out, and I landed on my feet with my back up against the hole, and I'm standing there going, now what do I do,
Doyle has no idea what's happened to his daughter. He's immediately stopped by an FBI officer.
He's pointing a gun at me, and he's cussing me out and telling me if I make a false move, you're going to blow my head off and all that stuff. So I get over to him, and he's screaming at me, where are the kids? Where are the kids?
They were questioned, relentlessly. Where are the children? Where are the kids? And none would respond.
I said, I haven't seen any kids for a couple of days. And of course, he wasn't too happy about that, and he's screaming, you're going to remember this for the rest of your life.
There is still no sign of the 28 children thought to be inside. Moments later, a woman jumps from a second-floor window in what seems like a desperate bid to escape. Then she gets up and runs back into the building. Hostage rescue team agent Jim McGee makes a daring attempt to save her life.
I laid down my shoulder weapon and went in through an opening, which probably was a window at one point. She just kind of turned her head away from me, kind of ignoring my question, and wouldn't respond.
A news camera captures the moment Jim McGee drags her to safety.
Within maybe 10, 20 seconds, the second floor collapsed into that room where we were at. There were literally only seconds, just seconds, before the place was completely consumed.
Strong winds cause the fire to spread at a terrifying rate. In just 18 minutes, the entire building is engulfed in flames. More than 70 people, including 2 pregnant women and 28 children, perish. Clive Doyle's daughter, Cherie, is amongst the dead. Cult leader David Koresh is found with a fatal bullet wound to the head.
This thing ended in a fashion that nobody wanted. 9 people came out that last day. Not one child came out.
The siege has gripped America. At its catastrophic end is headline news around the world.
President Bill Clinton backed the FBI today over the Waco disaster. He put the blame for the 86 lives lost squarely on the shoulders of the cult leader David Koresh.
In a non-violent, non-shooting circumstance.
But Clinton's statement fails to stop the press asking questions.
Ever ask Janet Reno?
Did the siege have to end in such a disaster? And did the actions of the federal authorities lead directly to the horrific deaths of so many men, women, and children? Now, by rewinding the events of that day, and by going deep into the official reports, former FBI agent Clint Van Zandt will reveal why so many people died. He will discover how the tragedy could have been avoided if the FBI had done things differently.
I think everyone wanted to know why. Why did so many Americans lose their lives ostensibly at the hand of government? You know, shouldn't there have been, couldn't there have been some way to resolve this without this terrible, terrible loss of life?
Van Zandt finds that the Branch Davidians had established Mount Carmel in 1935 when they formed as an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. High school dropout David Koresh joined the group in 1981 and became their leader 6 years later. Koresh believed he was the second coming of Christ, destined to trigger events that would bring about the end of the world. His ministry was based on references in the book of Revelation, describing Judgment Day and eternal life. The Davidians considered Koresh's pronouncements of equal importance to the Bible. To help fund the cult's existence, he began a business buying and selling weapons at local gun shows. Reports of automatic gunfire coming from the compound result in a surveillance operation by the ATF. In turn, this leads to the failed raid of February the 28th. But with so many people killed during the fire, Clint Van Zant's priority is to establish exactly how it started. In 1993, the official government investigation interviews numerous witnesses. It concludes that Branch Davidians started the fire. Something surviving Davidians strenuously deny.
We're hearing total fabrications of what was happening. A wave of cynicism comes over you. We're not getting a fair shake here. We're being misrepresented. We can't trust these people.
And worryingly for the authorities, 6 years after the siege, most Americans agree. In 1999, a Time magazine poll finds that 61% of the American public believe the government started the fire and then covered up their involvement. Detailed analysis of video footage reveals 3 main fires began almost simultaneously. In the cafeteria, the southeast corner, and the chapel. One theory is that CS gas canisters fired by the FBI could have started the blazes. The FBI deny the accusation, claiming they only used non-flammable canisters. But in 1999, an FBI photograph comes to light, showing spent casings of a different type of canister, one that relied on a pyrotechnic charge to disperse the gas. It's known these pyrotechnic charges can lead to fires. Clint Van Zant investigates when and where pyrotechnic CS rounds were fired to determine whether they caused the flames.
We fired 3 rounds. They had a pyrotechnic capability.
He finds records confirming that hostage rescue team operatives did fire 3 pyrotechnic CS gas rounds. But they fired them at a concrete construction pit over 20 meters from the main compound. And Van Zant discovers conclusive evidence that the rounds did not cause the fire.
Independent investigation has shown that the pyrotechnic rounds were fired 3 to 4 hours prior to the fire at Waco. All of this investigation shows that the pyrotechnic rounds had nothing to do with the fire at Waco.
The FBI's U-turn over the use of pyrotechnic canisters casts a shadow over the whole FBI operation.
These are the conspiratorial theories that have all been built on the idea, well, if the FBI didn't tell the truth about pyrotechnic rounds, what else didn't they tell the truth about?
Even if the FBI didn't start the fires with pyrotechnic rounds, the Davidians think they could have started the fires unintentionally. With no electricity for 4 weeks, kerosene lamps were used across the compound.
I would hate to believe that the FBI deliberately went in there and struck a match. But there's other reports that say, well, they're smashing the building up and knocking lanterns over or whatever may have caused it as well.
Yet forensic experts find no evidence that overturned kerosene lamps started the fire. But they do uncover startling evidence suggesting the fire was started by the Davidians themselves. Hostage rescue team sniper witnessed the Davidian starting a fire inside the front of the building. There is even more compelling evidence that suggests the fire was arson.
The decision was made to try to get a bug, so to speak, within the Branch Davidian compound so we could understand what was going on there. Technical agents were able to take a cardboard box, insert a device, and then provide that to the tactical team to fill with little cartons of milk, put up near the front door of the Davidian compound in the hopes that they would pick up the box.
On the day of the fire, the bug recorded faint sounds coming from inside the compound. When Van Zandt plays back the material, he discovers a vital clue to the origin of the fire.
At the very end, that listening device pick up terms such as, should we start the fire? David said start the fire. Words to that effect.
David said we have to get the fuel on. It's already poured. So we unload it first when they come in with the tank, right?
Clint Van Zandt finds the combination of evidence conclusive.
I think that the listening device is one piece of evidence. You couple that with eyewitness testimony, with photographic evidence, with independent investigation. My belief is the Branch Davidians started the fire. The FBI watched it burn.
Van Zandt is satisfied the Davidians and not the FBI started the fire. But causing the fire is not the only charge leveled at the FBI. Now Van Zandt must find out whether the FBI prevented Davidians from escaping the fire by shooting into the compound. April the 19th, 10:13 a.m. When FBI agents begin inserting CS gas into the compound, the Branch Davidians respond with a barrage of gunfire. In contrast to the initial raid on February the 28th, when ATF agents shot at the Davidian compound, the FBI deny firing a single shot at the Davidians.
There are allegations that on the last day at Waco, that the FBI used the cover of the compound to have their tactical agents get around behind the building when Branch Davidians were trying to escape or otherwise leave the building, that FBI agents were there to mow them down, to shoot them, to grab the bodies and throw them back in so they would burn inside.
Nobody, fired their weapon into the compound. Any rounds you fire, you're going to be held accountable for. At the end of the day, there's going to be a shooting review if a round is fired, and we're also aware that there's going to be endless scrutiny for every round fired.
Van Zandt examines key evidence that should reveal what really happened.
Back in the 1990s, the FBI had a unique aircraft. It was known as Night Stalker. By and large, this was a surveillance aircraft. By use of its forward-looking infrared capability, they were able to focus down on the compound itself to see what was going on.
In 1999, an expert in infrared camera technology examined night stalker footage from the last day of the siege. He concluded the footage showed 15 muzzle flashes coming from FBI positions, apparently proving that the FBI had shot at the Davidians. But Van Zandt also examines a report that reaches a very different conclusion. In March 2000, independent researchers staged a test at Fort Hood, Texas, just a few miles from Waco. Marksmen firing weapons were filmed by the Night Stalker plane. The muzzle flashes on this test footage looked quite different from those filmed on the last day of the siege. Researchers conclude that flashes on footage from the siege were caused by reflective materials on the ground.
There was a very distinct difference between the picture you'd get of a weapon being fired and a picture you'd be getting of bottle caps or pieces of glass reflecting the sun as the aircraft flew overhead. Conclusion, the FBI did not fire their weapons, and there is no photographic evidence to suggest otherwise.
Although Van Zandt doesn't find any evidence to suggest the FBI shot at the Davidians, he suspects FBI strategy and a split in the FBI ranks was at least partly to blame for the tragic outcome at Mount Carmel. The FBI deployed both a team of negotiators and an armed tactical team, the hostage rescue team. They were supposed to work together. But Van Zandt believes lack of communication between the two teams might have contributed to the siege's tragic conclusion.
One of the main challenges at Waco was the lack of coordination on the part of the FBI between command, between tactical, and between negotiations. There was a wall built between the negotiators and the tactical team.
Negotiators were focused on achieving a peaceful resolution to the standoff. The tactical team stood ready to force a conclusion, a task that led to a hardline attitude towards the Davidians.
If you're a member of a tactical team that may have to go inside and engage in an armed confrontation, I think it's easiest to see your adversary as just a criminal, as a violent, nasty criminal with a gun in his hand who wants nothing else but to kill you and kill those around them.
Well, I looked upon the Davidians as a violent aggressor. Absolutely. Nothing peaceful about them at all.
As a former FBI negotiator, Clint Van Zandt understands how the two teams should work together.
As a negotiator, I need the presence of force. I need a well-trained, well-disciplined, able to leap tall buildings at a single-bound tactical team. And therefore, as a negotiator, I don't have to state that threat, state that potential. It's there, and it's something that I can use as psychological collateral in this life and death poker game that we're playing at the time.
The contrasting approaches are supposed to complement each other, but at Waco, this wasn't happening.
the tactical team was being told or wasn't being corrected in their perception that the negotiators were just these limp-wristed social workers who were trying to give away the store while the tactical team was out in these terrible conditions and night and day and nothing was being done.
Because the two teams were not working as a unit, the Davidians received mixed messages.
They were very concerned that the authorities, the government, was going to seize their property, that they wouldn't have any place to live or come back to if they came out. Well, we assured them that we were not planning on doing that.
These assurances were completely undermined by the actions of the tactical team.
Unbeknownst to us, there were some instances, one where one of the tracked vehicles ran over one of the Branch Davidian cars out front. We didn't know any of this was happening.
They would do something that would just make you have an attitude, well, you can't trust these lads, you know, that they'll tell you anything just to get what they want, but they don't really deliver.
It meant negotiations stalled. The Davidians became even more determined not to leave the compound. So FBI commanders looked increasingly to the tactical team to resolve the standoff.
The negotiation process began to lose ground in the eyes of the on-scene commander, and his tactical options began to rise. Nobody wanted to be there any longer than we had to be, but there was a level of frustration.
The tactical team's solution was to put more psychological pressure on the Davidians. They cut power to the compound and made it impossible for the Davidians to sleep. The tougher tactics still failed to end the siege, and the FBI needed a new plan. The FBI decide they'll try to force the Davidians out with CS gas. Despite terrible suffering, not a single Davidian adult or child left the compound during 6 hours of gas attack. FBI tactics had simply escalated tensions. To understand how these tactics would affect the Davidians, Van Zandt studies a report written by criminal psychologist Professor Alan Stone that examines the relationship between Koresh and the FBI.
There was, without any question, a kind of macho struggle that developed between the FBI and David Koresh. When the FBI spoke to the public, they said, we're going to show him who's boss.
Stone believes this was exactly the wrong approach to take with a character like Koresh.
Downstairs to safety. If you take David Koresh seriously, if you get past the idea that he's a common criminal and a child molester, and you see there's this other part of it, then you understand what a risk you're taking in trying to close the noose. David Koresh was a control freak. So if you're going to try to show a control freak who is boss, you're asking for trouble.
No one's gonna hurt me or my family. That's American policy here. See, I'll meet you at the doorstep any day. You know, and somebody will get hurt. If you want to keep playing that game, I'm talking to you. somebody's going to get hurt.
You have a man who's close to being paranoid by psychiatric criteria, who is a control freak. And the idea that you can win an argument with a person like that by a force of will just is a totally mistaken notion.
Lord,
Van Zandt believes the key to understanding the Davidians' resolve not to leave the compound lies in David Koresh's interpretation of the Bible.
It's predicted in the scriptures that God's people are going to be involved in war, and they're going to have to fight to defend themselves.
Koresh taught the Davidians that they were God's chosen people, and confrontation with government forces is an event foretold in the Bible. In preparation for this impending battle, Koresh and the Davidians stockpiled over 300 weapons and nearly 400,000 rounds of ammunition, using the arms business as cover. Of the 76 Davidians who died on April the 19th, 20 died from gunshot injuries. Clive Doyle's daughter, Cherie, was killed by a single shot to the head. An independent pathologist determined the gunshots were all self-inflicted or delivered by fellow Davidians. The remaining Davidians died from the effects of the fire. 27 bodies were found in the concrete vault.
I came to the opinion that the Branch Davidians didn't look at suicide as an end, but as a new beginning.
Set against such a committed belief system, and after the toughest siege of its 85-year history, the FBI lost patience. Van Zandt believes they should have been even more patient.
I think that government always has the responsibility to do everything they can, no matter how long it takes, to resolve a situation nonviolently. If we don't do it today, there can always be tomorrow. Time was on the side of the government. We're the ones that escalated the clock, not the Branch Davidians.
It's now clear that a series of miscommunications and a failure to understand the mindset of David Koresh caused the federal authorities to embark on a terrible plan that could have only one outcome. "51 days to disaster. The Davidians are tipped off about an imminent raid on their compound by a news reporter asking directions. ATF commanders looking for illegal automatic weapons go ahead with the raid, knowing they have lost the vital element of surprise. The ensuing gunfight is the longest in U.S. law enforcement history. It leaves 4 ATF agents and 6 Davidians dead. Many more are seriously injured. "39 days to disaster. Most sieges last around 6 to 8 hours. After 9 days, the FBI tactical team is frustrated. They're trained to rescue hostages, not sit around for weeks on end. To force an end to the siege, they use psychological warfare tactics. This approach fails and only serves to anger cult members. 24 hours to disaster. A new FBI plan to end the siege is approved by President Clinton. 6 hours to disaster. The FBI begin to inject tear gas, even though little is known about its effect on children, and it has never been used in a building as big as the Davidian compound. What appears to the FBI as an orderly plan to drive the Davidians out is a terrifying experience for those inside. 12:07 p.m. Disaster. The Davidians start 3 fires almost simultaneously. Fueled by strong winds, the entire complex is quickly engulfed in flames. 3.5 hours later, just 9 adult Davidians have escaped the inferno. The complex is burnt to the ground. 28 children have lost their lives.
I think most of us at Waco would have danced with the devil if we thought we could get those children out alive. The adults got themselves in this situation. They make a conscious decision to stay in that compound, but the children had no choice.
The last element of control that every human being has is the ability to kill themselves. That's the only way they can control the horror of their mental experience. If you push a control freak, finally they will commit suicide.
Even though I'm 100% convinced that the Branch Davidians started the fire at Waco, I also know that the federal government, ATF, FBI, that we poured some of the emotional fuel on that fire that allowed it to burn so brightly and take so many lives.